So now that we've covered all four dimensions and the external factors throughout this section, I want to put it all together in a real-world example to really drive the point home of how these all work together. So we talked about our four dimensions: organizations and people, information and technology, partners and suppliers, and value streams and processes, as well as those 6 external factors that all are focused in and how we look at our products and services to co-create value with our consumers. Well, let's consider the process of incident management. How are we going to deal with incident management when something happens to our service or our product? Well, if we look at it through the organizations and people lens, or that dimension, we're going to ask the question of how we're going to organize our teams. Is this something the service desk is going to handle? Are we going to have different tiers like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 support? Or are we going to have a flat organization? These are all things we have to figure out. How are we going to organize our communications? How is that tier 1 representative going to transfer the information they collected to the tier 2 representative if you're going to use a tiered or vertical organization? How are you going to escalate it up to the next level? At which trip points? Well, how about the people you need? How are you going to decide how many people you need to run the incident management for a particular service? What competencies do they need? Is this service going to be something that uses AWS, so you need Amazon Web Service certified people? Or is this going to be something where we're going to use local services? How about the qualifications? How about the way they're going to interact? How are you going to motivate the people? How are you going to hire the right people? How are you going to keep the right people? How are you going to pay them? And how are you going to make sure that they're capable of doing the incident management that you want them to do? All of these are things you have to think about from the organizations and people lens, or perspective, or dimension. Now, when I look at it from the information technology side, let's think about it from the process standpoint. How am I going to register the incident? Am I writing it down on a piece of paper? Am I putting it in an intranet portal? Am I using a certain piece of software or hardware to do that? How about the relationships between incidents? How do I know that this incident with this printer that happened today is related or not related to the one that happened 3 weeks ago? Well, maybe I have some kind of technology or information management software that does that for me, that can track the incidents and the problems, or the incidents and the particular configuration item, meaning that printer, or the incidents and the different users who are being affected. Maybe when we get all these calls and we put them together, we find that all of the users affected all reside in building 1 and not in building 2. So maybe it's a problem with building 1. And so we can look into that, right? How about incident management tools for information flow? How are we going to do workflow? How are we going to use knowledge bases? How about diagnostic tools? How are we going to detect these events and process these events? How are we going to communicate with each other? How are we going to organize and share data? All of this is stuff that goes under that information part of the information and technology portion of this dimension. Then we get to our third dimension, and we start looking at our partners and suppliers, right? It's because nobody is self-sufficient. We talked about this before. Maybe this printer is broken because it ran out of supplies. There's no more paper. There's no more toner, right? So those are things we'd have to think about. When we think about partners and suppliers, we have to think about the external teams that are going to contribute to the success of our service. Maybe in this case, we have outsourced completely the management of the printers, and that company isn't doing a good job, and so we need to evaluate their contract. If we outsource a service, how are we going to escalate incidents to them once something is broken? Or maybe we escalate top tier service, so we handle minor incidents in-house, but we're going to outsource those major incidents, and so we have to escalate it to them. How do we get information back from them when they fix something, right? Two-way street between partners and suppliers and us. All of this is things that we have to think about when we start considering how we're going to operate with our partners and our suppliers, right? And then we have our final dimension to look at, which is going to be our value stream and our processes. Maybe we look at that value stream and see that this whole process of printing actually has issues with it because it's not optimized properly. There's too much waste in it. Maybe we've looked at it and we said, you know what, we can take out step number 2 and just make it step 1, 3, and 4, and that will solve the problem. All those things are things that we would evaluate as we look at it from the 4 dimensions. And then finally, we might want to look at it from those external perspectives. One of those, the E, stood for environmental. Maybe we have somebody who doesn't like the fact that we're printing and wasting a bunch of trees by printing out a lot of stuff. And so somebody might have jammed the printer on purpose to break it because they are an environmentalist, right? That's kind of crazy, but you kind of get the idea of what I'm talking about. We can start thinking about all of these 4 dimensions and these external factors and how they're going to affect a simple service, something like printing or something like an incident management. And as we look at this, that's how all of this ends up tying together. And that's the whole idea of using these 4 dimensions when you're thinking about your processes, your people, your organization, your technology, your information, all of that stuff, so that you can make sure that your products and services are delivering the value they're supposed to.